Pentecost may be the time of the rapture. The rapture may come at Pentecost, which occurs in mid-May this year, May 19th or May 20th. The Jewish Pentecost is the 19th, the Christian Pentecost is the 20th. If the rapture comes at Pentecost, this means the Russian attack would come at Pentecost, because the Russian attack would fulfill the sudden destruction which occurs at the rapture of 1 Thessalonians chapter 4:16 through 5 verse 3. 5 verse 3 mentions the sudden destruction. Why do I say Pentecost for the time of the rapture? Well, Paul the Apostle says that the feast times in the law of Moses, which refers to the first 5 books of the Bible, these holy feast times contain a shadow of things to come. In other words, they're prophetic of future events, especially in the end time. That's Hebrews 10, verse 1, and Colossians 2, verse 15 through 17. So one of these feast times may be when the rapture takes place. Also, we know the rapture occurs on, quote, the day of the Lord, which is 5 verse 2 of 1 Thessalonians. Day of the Lord actually is shorthand for Judgment Day of the Lord, or the day of the Lord's judgment. In the Old Testament, Day of the Lord always meant judgment through war. God's judgment can come in other forms other than war, but it's never called Day of the Lord when those other forms are used. Day of the Lord always refers to a time of war serving as God's judgment on a nation. For example, Isaiah 13 verse 1 and 6 and 17, and Ezekiel 30 verse 3 and verse 10. Isaiah 13 says, Babylon, the day of the Lord for Babylon is coming, and then it mentions the Medes and the Persian armies attacking Babylon. In Ezekiel, it says the day of the Lord is coming for Egypt, and then it mentions the armies of Babylon attacking Egypt. Now, the reason I mention this data about Day of the Lord is Day of the Lord as a judgment day is Yom Kippur is also considered a judgment day, a symbolic judgment day. So the real judgment day, by which I mean the day of the Russian attack and the rapture, the real judgment day may come on a day that has something to do with Yom Kippur, which means the Day of Atonement. There were 3 rituals on Yom Kippur. These 3 rituals were performed by the high priest. They are extremely important, for the first ritual was fulfilled at the time of the first of the big 3 holy times given in the law of Moses, namely Passover. The big 3 feast times were Passover, Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, that's in Deuteronomy 16, verse 16. The whole chapter of Deuteronomy 16 explains each of the big 3 feasts. These were the 3 times each year in which all the males, all the adult males of Israel were supposed to assemble in Jerusalem at the temple. The first ritual of Yom Kippur was fulfilled at the first feast, which is Passover, AD 30. Now, based on that precedent, we can assume or speculate that the second ritual should be fulfilled at the time of the second feast, which would be Passover. Which would be Pentecost. But the second ritual at Yom Kippur is clearly symbolic of the rapture. So this means that the rapture could very well occur at Pentecost. What do I mean when I say the second ritual of Yom Kippur symbolizes the rapture? Here is the rapture, the second ritual. The high priest comes down from the Holy of Holies, which is the innermost room of the temple. He comes outside the temple. This translates into Christ coming down from heaven. For the Holy of Holies represents heaven, and the high priest stands for Christ. That's in Hebrews 4:14 and 7 verse 17. Next, the high priest picks up a bowl of goat's blood and brings it back. He carries it back into the Holy of Holies. Now this translates into Christ gathering the souls of the church and carrying them or escorting them back to heaven. For the bowl of goat's blood, the goat represents the people of Israel, the whole congregation of Israel. That's Leviticus 16, 15 through 17, verse 15 through 17. And the congregation of Israel, by extension, stands for the church. The blood stands for the life or the soul. That's Leviticus 17:14. So if we put the pieces of the puzzle all together to form a picture, what do we see? We see Christ coming down from heaven and gathering the souls of the church, of the Jews and Christians, and escorting them back to heaven, Christ and the angels, escorting the rapturees back to heaven. Doesn't that sound like the rapture? What I said about the second ritual? I should emphasize that no other teacher is aware of the meaning of the three rituals of Yom Kippur, the symbolism. And so they don't know enough to even consider connecting the three rituals with the three holy feast times. Not Hal Lindsey, not Jack Van Impe, not Dave Hunt, not Tim LaHaye, not Grant Jeffries, not Jimmy DeYoung, not Ed Hindson, nobody except myself. So I'm trying, the whole world, the whole church around the world is completely ignorant of this whole thing. And I'm trying to change that. I'm trying to rectify this situation. And I want you, YOU, to help me do that by spreading the word about the three rituals in Yom Kippur and the three feast times that connect with the three rituals. There's only a short time left before Pentecost in May, the middle of May. So, time is short. So please do what you can in the time that is left. Now let me get back to the first ritual. I said that was fulfilled at Passover, 30 AD. Here is the first ritual. The high priest comes out of the Holy of Holies. He picks up a bowl of calf's blood and carries it back into the Holy of Holies. Now, Christ, this was fulfilled, this symbolizes Christ coming down from heaven at the time of the incarnation and being born, and then going to the cross and going back to heaven. We read that the bull or calf stands for the high priest. That's Hebrews. I'm sorry. That's Leviticus 16, 6 and 11. Verse 6 and 11. The blood stands for the life or soul. And that's Leviticus 17, 14. Now, Christ went to heaven. After he died on the cross, he went to heaven at Passover. So the symbolism of the first ritual was fulfilled right at Passover. Christ ascended to heaven, to his heavenly throne on Ascension Day, 40 days after Passover. But that doesn't change the fact that when he died, he did go to heaven. Because we read, because Christ told the thief on the cross that was crucified beside Christ, he said, today you will be with me in paradise. That's Luke 23:43. Although he didn't stay in heaven, because he rose from the dead 2 days later, he did go to heaven on a Good Friday. Anyway, we do see that the first ritual was fulfilled in AD 30. Now for the third ritual. It should be fulfilled at the third feast, which is the Feast of Tabernacles. The ritual is the high priest comes down from the Holy of Holies. He puts both hands on the head of a goat, a scapegoat. He puts the sin of Israel, he transfers the sin of the iniquity of Israel onto the head of this goat. We read, quote, "The goat will bear the iniquity of Israel." That's Leviticus 16, verse 21 through 22. This goat of sin, this sin-bearing goat, is then driven into the wilderness. Now, what does this symbolize? The goat of sin represents the man of sin, which is a title for the Antichrist in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. The purpose of the second coming is to destroy the Antichrist. That's 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 7 through 8. So we see that the third ritual really does symbolize the second coming and Christ defeating or destroying the Antichrist. But if the Russian attack occurs at Pentecost in mid-May, and Christ defeats the Antichrist in mid-October at the Feast of Tabernacles, then there's only a 5-month tribulation between those 2 points. Is that biblically justifiable? Is that biblically supported? The 5 months would be June, July, August, September. That's 4. And you take the last half of May and the first half of October, and that adds up to another month, and so you have 5 months. How can the tribulation be so short? Well, Christ himself said in Matthew 24:22 that he would shorten the tribulation for the sake of the elect, because otherwise there would be no flesh that would be left that would survive. He's hinting at a Russian-Chinese war. You see, after Russia takes Europe and bombs America on the day of the Rapture, China would be very mad at Russia because Russia would be taking away from China's 2 top trading partners, America and Europe. And so China would say, well, Russia's going to come after us sometime, so why should we wait until they're ready? Why not catch them off balance so China would get ready to go to war with Russia? And then Christ comes before that war can take place for the sake. He does it for the sake of the Christians in China and in Russia, because they have suffered enough in the past. Now, it's no coincidence that 5 months is written in black and white it mentions Revelation 9, verse 5 and 10, specifies 5 months. Now, could this be referring to the time of the tribulation, the time of the Russian occupation of Western Europe by Russian tanks and Russian fighting vehicles? Yes, the evidence is clearly there. For in that passage, it mentions locusts with breastplates of iron. So these locusts are iron or metallic. And it says they make the sound. Their sides make the sound of war chariots going to battle. Now, that what is the modern day equivalent of war chariots? It would have to be tanks and other fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers. Also, it says that people will not be dying during this period of the 5 months. In war, there'd be, of course, killing. And but after the war is over, there would be the occupation. And there'd be much less killing, much fewer deaths. And it says in this passage, they will want to die, but death will flee from them. So that does describe a time of the occupation of the conquering army. So Revelation 9 really is suggestive of the Russian occupation of Western Europe, which is the fulfillment of Daniel 7, verse 8. The invasion of Western Europe is in Daniel 7, verse 8. If you have any comments or questions about the connecting of the 3 rituals to the 3 feast times, and if you want to know why it has to be this particular year, please email me at joegrace@gmail.com. That's JOEGRACE GRACE.